Good evening, everybody. This evening, we are going to be running two meetings concurrently. We will begin with a public hearing for budget is now open. Is there anyone present that would like to address the board regarding the 2019-2020 budget? Okay, I'm hearing none. So I will now call the board meeting to order. It's 7:03. So, Mr. Nolan, would you please walk us through the Pledge of Allegiance this evening?
It'd be my pleasure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan.
My pleasure.
Okay, next we have public comment on the agenda. So, Mrs. Moss, I do believe that we have some public comment for this evening. So would you please begin?
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, the first one is from Patricia Wah. She writes, I am very disappointed to hear that Wandry is staying as superintendent. He has led us in the wrong direction too many times. I have lost trust in him, and I believe many others feel the same way. I will not vote for any new funds for LCS as long as he is superintendent. If you can't hire a new superintendent because of the pandemic, just give him a 6-month contract with no increase in pay. Keep looking. We need new leadership with no hidden agendas. Second public comment is from Margaret Tompkins. I am writing to all to say that I completely support the decision of the district to retain Mr. Wandry at this time. I cannot imagine trying to find someone with the vast experience he has or someone who has their finger on the pulse of our district at this point in time. We need someone with strong leadership skills to make sure that our district can enter the next phase of education with as minimal disruption as possible. It seems as the education group support the decision to ask him to stay. I am not one to completely understand the ins and outs of educational expertise, so I will defer to their advice. From my experience over the last 8 years or so since Mr. Wandry joined our district, I have had nothing but positive encounters with him. He has worked with his team to provide excellent opportunities for all children in the district. I cannot say enough. I have one child who is going to be a sophomore at Kettering University and has literally sailed through her first year. This could not have been accomplished without the amazing opportunities she was afforded through LCS, most with Mr. Wandry and the team that he has assembled at the helm. I have one more who will be a junior this year and is taking advantage of the new program through the high school for CNC or robotics programming, which was obtained through Mr. Wandry appointing a teacher to head the STEM programming in our schools. This insight into what our kids need and what is possible for them is second to none. I cannot imagine trying to do a superintendent search at this time. There are so many unknowns and we need a constant in our midst at this point. I want to thank Mr. Wandry for selflessly agreeing to give up his opportunity elsewhere to stay here and provide our kids and employees with great leadership at a time when we are in turmoil. The next public comment comes from Heidi Fresh. Let me start by saying, as a former employee, Mr. Wandry needs a course on how to treat his employees. You get more quality work when you feel appreciated and noticed. I really hope the board isn't up for election anytime soon. We the people are tired. My kids may no longer attend here, but my grandkids have to, and the teachers and staff in general are great. Yet because of Mr. Wandry, bullying, and poor work ethics, they have lost some of the most amazing teachers to other districts. Current employees are afraid to go to him with any issues unless you're a favorite, and he doesn't have many. And as having former children with special needs, he's all too happy to let them lead to another district. When we started to realize that our teachers were being reprimanded for doing what the IEP stated, we pulled both our children immediately and they graduated somewhere else. When I tried to reach him at the time myself was an employee, I received a returned email from him that said, "Why are you bothering me with this?" When you sit in a teacher conference with a teacher in tears because she is no longer allowed per admin, yes, I was told by said teacher she was reprimanded by him for doing her job to help a child with a learning disability the way they are supposed to or lose their job, question mark. There's something wrong with that. Now my grandkids have to start school and I'm very worried about them going through the same hell that my kids did. We need a competent new superintendent. The next public comment comes from April Lapeer, parent of Jacob, 10th grade student at Lapeer High School, parent of Broderick, 8th grade student at Zemmer, and parent of Jameson, a 4th grade student at Murphy Elementary. I would like to take the opportunity to express my appreciation to the board for retaining Matt Wandry at this time for superintendent. During these uncertain and uncharted waters associated with the health crisis COVID-19, I have supported Mr. Wandry in the past with his strong leadership, innovative ideas, and willingness to collaborate with the Lapeer community to help keep LCS at the forefront of technology and opportunities for all students. I was disappointed when he sought out other job opportunities and disheartened when he accepted a position and was preparing to leave Lapeer at the end of this month. The thought of finding a new superintendent in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, starting the 2020-2021 school year without an established leader, in addition to the ever-changing directives coming from the Michigan Governor's Office, was concerning. Unprecedented and fluid changes are facing Lapeer and every other public school in the country. It will require strong and immediate leadership to navigate these challenges. If Mr. Wandry would have left Lapeer this June, a leadership vacuum would have cost valuable time and diverted attention away from the most important problems facing students and staff this fall. In my opinion, right now, our Lapeer Board of Education and administrators need to spend their time focusing on the task of educating our children. As a parent of 3 LCS students, I expect a better solution to education than what we've had to struggle through the past 3 months. And with a seasoned leader at the helm, I have more confidence that it can get done. This decision to retain him as superintendent makes sense to me for now, and I am eager to continue my support. Thank you for your time and for allowing me to share my public comment. The next public comment comes from Colleen Lewis, registered voter of Lapeer County. I would like to have my voice heard by the board. As a voting member of this community, mother of 4 and grandmother to 3, I would like to see Lapeer choose a new superintendent for the Lapeer school system. Mr. Wandry has tried to leave on multiple occasions. The community should not be landing pad when these opportunity of his falls through for whatever reason. The reason isn't important to me. I want someone in charge of our schools who cares, has some skin in the game, maybe have a relative in our school system, and someone who can actually be looked up to by our children. Mr. Wandry was the superintendent when one of the indiscretions happened. My youngest daughter was in the school system and asked me, if the superintendent doesn't have to follow the rules, why should I? Of course, I explained to her that he was not above any rules or laws. It did lead to a conversation about things not always being fair and how sometimes people got away with things they shouldn't. We can only hope at this time that karma catches up. Hire someone that cares about our kids in our community. Hire someone that has morals and ethics. Hire someone that kids can actually look up to as a positive role model. The next public comment comes from Bob Denny. Dear Lapeer Community Schools Board of Education, as a member of the community, I trust the board to make sound educational and business decisions that are in the best interest of our students. This trust was earned over the last 10 years by supporting the admiration and staff and the implementation of improved program delivery, utilization of data tracking, robust performance goals, and team accountability. With the state educational budget projected shortfall of $2 billion and the unknown method of instruction this fall, it would be very difficult to successfully find another superintendent that understands our district and has proven leadership abilities to lead the district through these 2 tremendous challenges. Therefore, I am encouraged by the news that Mr. Wandry will be continued as Lapeer Community Schools Superintendent. The last public comment comes from Christy Kiger. While I no longer have children in the LCS district, I am still actively involved as a district volunteer and as a board member for the Leader Fund organization. Mr. Wandry started our organization back in 2015, the year our two high schools were merged into one entity, Lapeer High School. Even though many in the district were consumed with helping our staff and students navigate through this new One Lapeer environment, Mr. Wandry was already on to his next challenge, trying to find innovative ways to consistently create more opportunities for our students and move our district forward despite funding cuts, which resulted in the creation of the Leader Fund. Since its inception, the Leader Fund, along with our community partners, donors, and volunteers, have worked tirelessly to raise more than $200,000 to provide supplies, program enhancements, and scholarships for graduating seniors throughout Lapeer Community Schools across multiple areas of the district, including literacy, special education, performing arts, STEM, PLTW, robotics, life skills, math, science, technology, and athletic infrastructure. Without Mr. Wandry's thoughtful leadership and ability to go outside of the box to make improvements for our district, the Leader Fund organization would not have been created, and many of these programs and opportunities would not have been available for our students. I look forward to working with Mr. Wandry as we continue to partner with LCS to ensure that our students have the best educational experience possible, regardless of the challenges that lie ahead as the face of education continues to evolve. Thank you for your leadership and commitment to our district, Mr. Wandry. Madam President, that concludes the public announcements.
Thank you, Mary Moss. I appreciate that. So we will go into the next section of our agenda this evening is our reports, our committee reports. So first, Mrs. Novak, would you please share the report from the Finance and Operations Committee?
Yes, thank you. So we met on June 18th, 2020 at 11 a.m. Committee members, myself, Brad Hagedon, and Denise Becker, along with Matt Wandry, Mark Rader, Kim Sieferle, Danielle Corbell, Mary Moss, and from Oakland ISD, Tammy Evans, Paul Spohr, Robin Evanson, and Ryan Veltzi. The committee discussed the technology service agreement with Oakland ISD. The district has been looking for a different solution for our tech services with the pending retirement of technology supervisor Nick Ward. Mark Rader and Kim Sieferle reviewed the proposed technology service agreement to deliver technology services for the district, with Tammy Evans from Oakland ISD giving input. They currently have a regional program with 15 districts participating. This shared service would be beneficial to both staff and students, especially in an ever-increasing virtual environment that we experienced just recently. It was the consensus of the committee to recommend full board approval at the June 24th meeting. And then we talked about the 1920 final budget. Mark Rader and Danielle Corbell revealed the final budget for 2019-2020. Currently, there are no prorations as of right now. More information will be coming from the state after the revenue conference in August. Danielle informed the committee that the implementation of GASB 84, which includes fiduciary activities, will be delayed due to COVID-19. We discussed the 2021 budget. Mark Rader and Danielle reviewed the budget for 2020 and 2021 and announced that there will be no major changes since the last Finance and Ops meeting held at the end of May. The most likely scenario will be budgeting for a $700 per pupil cut. Any new funding information doesn't seem to be available until after the third revenue conference in late August or early September. New information from the state would result in a budget amendment sometime in the fall of 2020. It was the consensus of the committee to recommend full board approval at the June 24th board meeting. Cash flow borrowing. Mark Rader and Danielle explained the cash flow borrowing resolution that has been drafted to not exceed $7 million. This is necessary in order to cover the district's cash flow from August until the first state aid payment is received later in the fall. We have to do this every year, so it's nothing new. It was the consensus of the committee that the cash flow resolution be approved and will be placed on the June 24th agenda. And then we talked about the food service bill bid. Sorry, Mark Rader explained that per state law, the district must go out to bid for a food service management company every 5 years. Bids went out and there were 4 interested companies at the pre-bid meeting. However, Compass/Chartwells was the only company to actually place the bid. Information must be submitted and approved by Michigan Department of Education, MDE. The formal submission of documents will be submitted the week of June 22nd to MDE for formal approval. The district is also planning for the coming years to replace outdated and aging kitchen equipment to improve kitchen efficiencies. It was the consensus of the committee to recommend full board approval at the June 24th, this meeting tonight. COVID-19, new policy 8460, operations COVID-19 preparedness and response plan, mitigation, self-reporting, leave of absence, new administrative guideline 8460, operations control of casual contact, communicable diseases. Kim Seiferle reviewed the new board policy 8460 and AG administrative guideline 8460 that need to be put in place in order to comply with the existing COVID-19 guidelines. The policy and AG were drafted by our legal counsel, Collins and Blaha, and are compliant with the executive order. It was the consensus of the committee that we recommend board approval for the first reading of board policy 8460 at the June 24th board meeting. And then lastly, instructional plan, learning plan for fall. Information from the governor's office this week determined that instruction for 2020-21 school year will be face-to-face. Detailed information from the state will be coming within the next few weeks. The goal is to provide as much face-to-face instruction as possible, with still complying with social distancing guidelines. At this point, we are moving forward with year-round instruction for this school year. And our meeting was adjourned at 12:03 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Novak. Do we have any questions or comments?
Madam President, I just wanted to point out that Tammy Evans from Oakland ISD has joined us on the Zoom conference this evening to answer any direct questions the board may have of her in relation to the technology service agreement. As the board knows, it was agreed that we would pull that formal consideration from this evening's list of action items to address some contractual concerns that have been identified. We have already begun that process by connecting the Oakland ISD legal representation with district counsel. And it is our intention that should we have all the questions answered and satisfied, contractual concerns addressed, that we would move that for full board consideration at the July 16th organizational meeting. So Tammy's here as it relates to that if we have any questions.
A question, I guess. How does this work in terms of you being able to handle, Tammy, sorry, Craig Watson, being able to handle if everybody, you're working with 15 different things, everybody goes virtual? Is that something that you guys can handle easily, not easily, personnel, et cetera? I guess that's a big question if we have to go that route.
I appreciate that question, Mr. Watson. Yes, I mean, we've been planning for well before this on how to best support virtual districts. We have several districts that have variations of online programs. So everything from total online to hybrid to, yeah, we're not quite there yet. So we've been able to adjust our programs to fit that. We have a centralized service desk and a centralized engineering, and then we use staff to augment on site. So if a district is 100% virtual, then their services are a little different. So yes, we've been able to adapt very easily to that.
Thank you.
Dr. Watson, I asked some pretty tough questions at that meeting. Tammy was gracious enough to answer them. One of the things that I was encouraged was they're bringing in more staff than what we currently have. So we're going to have more people to help and to assist with technology, as well as they had some really good answers for devices. The fact that a lot of our students don't have devices and they can help us with that aspect of it as well. And like I said, and it is a school, so they have 15 districts, so they're very well versed, it seemed like, in in what they're doing and have had lots of practice and lots of experience in this. So.
Fantastic. Yeah, I guess that's our biggest thing. You know, what we ran into in the spring was connectivity. You know, there isn't any. So I guess even having the right people, and a lot of people, we still don't have the connectivity unless we have options to get that connectivity.
Or devices. I mean, it was mom had the laptop and then the kids needed it for school. You know, mom was working, kids didn't have the laptop. So yeah, devices is a big deal too. Yeah. And the employees are excited about it. So I think that's kind of cool too.
Summer, can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
I just wanted to say that over the weekend, I spent some time with some HR personnel at Ford Motor Company and at Honeywell, and they talked quite openly about the fact that it is very difficult for even those two really large corporations to retain quality IT people and those that can help handle their systems. I think this is a really good contract for our district. I think it's a great idea. Sort of allows all of these districts, including now Lapeer, to pool their buying power, keep, highly trained people, and know that we've got just a good solid force behind us and those that are able to actually roll out and implement all of the systems that may be required, whatever we end up doing starting in the fall. But I think it's just a great idea, and sort of like we've done with the cooperative buying programs over the years, it's just something that allows us to be a player in the market and have good people help us as we go forward.
Thank you. Other questions for Mrs. Evans? No?
If there are no other questions as it relates to the tech service agreement, Madam President, I just wanted to point out the last item that Mrs. Novak highlighted was the instructional learning plan for the fall. I know that many of our parents, I was going to save this for superintendent comments, but I think it's appropriate to mention it as part of this committee report. A number of our parents are certainly anxious to learn what the learning plan will look like in the fall. And the governor announced very recently that, of course, within restrictions and paying special attention to all the distancing requirements and cleaning requirements, that face-to-face instruction is a possibility for the fall. They are putting together and releasing a return to school roadmap as of June 30th, and districts across the state will then have some pretty specific guidelines as it relates to how to direct their return. Is our plan in the next week or two as a district to share that roadmap and how we're adapting it in Lapeer schools to our programming, so that update with more specific information about what school will look like in the fall is coming very soon.
Thanks. Appreciate those additional comments. I know we're all eager for that information. Thanks, Ms. Evans, also for answering our questions to the tech agreement. We appreciate that. Okay, so let's move on to our next committee report, is the Personnel Committee. Mr. Nolan, would you share the report with us, please?
Certainly, thank you very much. We met on June 22nd, beginning at 9:12 a.m. via Zoom. That's why we need all of these good technical folks. And our conversation lasted for probably a good hour and a half. Actually, it was about an hour and a half. And the sole item on the agenda was discussion regarding the superintendent and assistant superintendent contracts. We had a good discussion during the course of our meeting, but it was agreed at the conclusion that we needed additional time to consider the contracts and to deliberate on those contracts. So the report tonight is that our committee will reconvene before our July 16th organizational meeting, and at which time we hope that we will be back with a proposal that will be available for board consideration at that time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nolan.
My pleasure.
Any questions?
Madam President, if I could, I would like to go back to the finance and ops for a minute. I just had a question concerning the June 30th guidelines that are coming out from the state. Are they also going to be giving us policy recommendations as well as administrative guidelines for those policies?
I don't think, Mr. Keller, those will come in that form. I think what they'll allow to happen and what district legal counsel is already doing is getting advance notice of what what was contained inside of that roadmap. And all along the way, we have been getting policy language updates from various attorneys in their specialty area in correspondence with executive orders or new guidelines. So those things are coming in simultaneous to directions from the MDE and the governor's office.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't, I was hoping we weren't going to have to play catch up. So sounds like maybe you're getting things from NOLA already. And...
Well, we'll still have to play catch up. But yeah, not only Neola, but the actual firms in the specialty areas that some of these things refer specifically to are providing some guidance for us in that regard. Because to your point, the policy language is lagging behind how rapidly for example, the executive orders change and things of that nature. So we are. Hence the policy that's on the agenda for tonight for adoption, right? So yeah, that's proof positive that these things are happening simultaneous to the release of this information.
Okay, thank you. Apologize for getting off the agenda, but I was going to cut in and then we're on Zoom. It's a little hard. So
That's okay. I don't mind, and I think I went by very quickly, so no problem. Any other questions or comments?
I would, Madam President, concur with Mr. Nolan's assessment of the Personnel Committee meeting. Really good conversation. Considering the board packet for this evening is 200+ pages long, and there are so many changes and things happening in the district right now. The administrators on the call, the board members present, just did not feel it was the appropriate time to rush through what is going to be a very important discussion. So I appreciate the board's willingness to pump the brakes a little bit and deliberate a bit further on what is to be an important topic. So all around agreement on what Mr. Nolan had to say and support for that.
Yes, I concur. Any other comments? Okay, I think then we will move into the action items portion of the agenda. So first first item is in consent grouping. We have the approval of the minutes of June 3rd, 2020 regular meeting, and the first reading of the new policy 8460, COVID-19 preparedness and response plan mitigation, self-reporting, and leave of absence. Is there any items anyone wishes to have removed from the consent grouping? Okay, I hear none.
I'll make a motion that the reading of the minutes be waived and the consent agenda items be approved as presented.
Support.
Okay, I think that was Keller support, right, first? Okay, so I have a nomination and a support. So Mr. Keller?
Aye.
Mr. Nolan?
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Dr. Watson?
Aye.
Mrs. Becker?
Aye.
Mrs. Novak?
Aye.
Mrs. Novak?
Aye.
Thank you. And Mrs. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Okay, now we are moving into the 2019-2020 final budget amendment.
I will move that the 2019-2020 general fund amendments be approved as presented.
Support.
Okay. There is a motion and a support. Any discussion on the motion? Yes, Mr. Nolan?
Summer, I just want to say real quickly that, especially after listening to some of the public comment, our administrative team is right on the money when it comes to budgeting and the appropriations for each year. Once again, based on what little information we had going into our budget season this time last year, looking at that, comparing it to where we are now, they did a fantastic job and we were right on the money, and I appreciate that very much.
Thank you. I agree with your comments. Okay, any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Keller,
Aye.
Mr. Nolan,
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Dr. Watson,
Aye.
Mrs. Becker? Mrs. Becker?
She's muted.
Okay, I saw her lips say aye, but she is muted.
Aye.
Mrs. Novak?
Aye.
And Mrs. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Okay, we have the 2019-2020 food service amendments.
I'll motion that the 2019-2020 Food Service Fund amendments be approved as presented.
Support.
Okay. So I have a motion and a support. Any discussion of the motion? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Keller,
Aye.
Mr. Nolan,
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Dr. Watson,
Aye.
Mrs. Becker,
Aye.
Mrs. Novak,
Aye.
Mrs. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Okay, now we have the 2019-2020 2013 limited tax school building and site bond debit retirement fund.
I'll make a motion that the 2019, 2020, 2013 limited tax school building and site bonds debt retirement fund amendments be approved as presented.
Okay, I have a motion.
Support.
How can you not support that?
Aye.
Mr. Nolan,
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Dr. Watson,
Aye.
Mrs. Becker,
Aye.
Mrs. Novak,
Aye.
Mrs. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Okay, now we have the 2019, 2020, 2014 limited tax school building and site bond debit retirement fund.
I'll move that the 2019, 2020, 2014 limited tax school building and site bonds debt retirement fund amendments be approved as presented.
Support.
Okay, I heard Hagedorn, I think. We have a motion and a support. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Keller,
Aye.
Mr. Nolan,
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Dr. Watson,
Aye.
Mrs. Becker,
Aye.
Mrs. Novak,
Aye.
Mrs. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Okay, now we have the 2019, 2020, 2015 limited tax building and site bond debit retirement.
I'll move that the 2019, 2020, 2015 limited tax school building and site bonds debt retirement fund amendments be approved as presented.
Support.
Or was that you, Denise?
Yeah.
So I have a motion and support. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Keller,
Aye.
Mr. Nolan,
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Dr. Watson,
Aye.
Mrs. Becker,
Aye.
Mrs. Novak,
Aye.
Mrs. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. And then we have the 2019, 2020, 2016 limited tax building and site bond debt retirement fund.
I'll make a motion that the 2019, 2020, 2016 limited tax school building and site bonds debt retirement fund amendments be approved as presented.
I'll support.
A motion and a support. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Keller,
Aye.
Mr. Nolan,
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Dr. Watson,
Aye.
Mrs. Becker,
Aye.
Mrs. Novak?
Aye.
Mrs. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Okay, at this time, the public hearing for budget is now closed. We will now move on to the adoption of the 2020-2021 budget.
I'll move that the 2020-2021 general fund budget be adopted as presented.
Support.
Support, I didn't get the support, but I know there is one. Was that Keller?
Yes.
Okay. So I have a motion and support. Any discussion on the motion? Okay.
Just a comment, if I may,
Sure.
that once again, the state puts us in a position where we are required to pass a bond before we'll ever know any money that we may get. And this is even more unusual this year in that they are not expected to release any real information to us until August. So I just want anybody listening to understand that we're shooting in the dark on this and we're doing the best that we can.
Yes. Appreciate those comments, Mr. Nolan. Any other discussion? Okay. Mr. Keller,
Aye.
Mr. Nolan,
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Dr. Watson,
Aye.
Mrs. Becker,
Aye.
Mrs. Novak,
Aye.
Mrs. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Okay, we have the 2020-2021 food service fund budget.
I'll make a motion that the 2020-2021 food service fund budget be adopted as presented.
I'll
Support.
Okay. We have a support. Motion and a support. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Keller,
Aye.
Mr. Nolan,
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Dr. Watson,
Aye.
Mrs. Becker,
Aye.
Mrs. Novak,
Aye.
Mrs. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Okay, now the 2020-2021 student activity fund budget.
We'll move that the 2020-2021 student activity fund budget be adopted as presented.
Support.
Okay, I have a motion and a support. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, Mr. Keller,
Aye.
Mr. Nolan,
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Dr. Watson,
Aye.
Mrs. Becker,
Aye.
Mrs. Novak,
Aye.
Mrs. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Okay, now moving on to 2021, 2013 limited tax building and site bond debt retirement fund.
I'll make a motion that the 2020, 2021, 2013 limited tax school building and site bonds debt retirement fund be adopted as presented.
Support.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a support. And any discussion on the motion? Okay, Mr. Keller,
Aye.
Mr. Nolan,
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Dr. Watson,
Aye.
Mrs. Becker,
Aye.
Mrs. Novak,
Aye.
Mrs. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Now the 2020-2021, 2014 limited tax school building and site bond debt retirement fund.
I'll move that the 2020, 2021, 2014 limited tax school building and site bonds debt retirement fund budget be adopted as presented.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion and a support. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, Mr. Keller,
Aye.
Mr. Nolan,
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Dr. Watson,
Aye.
Mrs. Becker,
Aye.
Mrs. Novak,
Aye.
Mrs. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Now the 2020, 2021, 2015 limited tax school building and site bonds debt retirement fund budget.
I'll make a motion that the 2020, 2021, 2015 limited tax school building and site bonds debt retirement fund budget be adopted as presented.
Support.
Okay, I have a motion and a support. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Keller,
Aye.
Mr. Nolan,
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Dr. Watson,
Aye.
Mrs. Becker,
Aye.
Mrs. Novak,
Aye.
says aye, motion carried. Okay, now we have the 2020, 2021, 2016 limited tax school building and site bonds debit retirement fund budget.
I'll move that the 2020, 2021, 2016 limited tax school building and site bonds debt retirement fund budget be adopted as presented.
Support.
Support.
Okay. I have a motion and a support. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, Mr. Keller,
Aye.
Mr. Nolan,
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Dr. Watson,
Aye.
Mrs. Becker,
Aye.
Mrs. Novak,
Aye.
Mrs. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Okay, now we have the cash flow borrowing resolution.
I'll move that the cash flow borrowing resolution be approved as presented.
Support.
Okay. I have a motion by Keller and a supported by Watson. Any discussion on the motion?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Nolan.
I just wanted, this is my last chance to whine about this one. I've been doing it for about 15 years now. This is perhaps one of the most frustrating things to me, that we have to borrow money because of a difference between our fiscal year and the state's fiscal year, just to bridge a gap. And if they could ever come together and put legislation out there where we aligned our calendars, we wouldn't probably have to borrow this money. So we pay the state of Michigan interest on the money that we have to borrow to bridge a gap that they've created. So I just want to put that out there, that once again, I find this really irritating. And I hope that all of you that are continuing on after I'm gone don't find it to be as frustrating as I do, because someone will fix this as we move forward.
Pretty much still what I was going to say. I absolutely hate this resolution. You know, the fact that we're borrowing money from the state to stay afloat and then pay it back with interest. So you hit it for me, Mike. Thanks.
My pleasure.
I'm sure Mark Rader would agree. I lived through the change of this, and it was a budget fix. And that's how they got away with the budget at the time this was enacted. So yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. And the interest we pay is astounding. So yeah, I would agree. It's dumb.
Can't borrow from anywhere else.
It costs, doesn't matter. Interest. Yeah.
But instead of giving it to somebody else, we
State you can borrow from.
Craig, to answer your question.
right on your juggler. They get you right there.
Borrow
Yep.
and we tell you where to borrow it from.
Right. And how much you're going to pay for it.
That's right.
That's right.
But we're going to make you a deal.
We're from the government and we're here to help. Let's go.
Wow.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
Mark. We stole your thunder.
No, I was just going to say is that there are other avenues, but they're much smaller. And so the magnitude, when you look at a district's cash flow borrowing and then the magnitude statewide, collectively, even though, as Mr. Nolan pointed out, we pay interest, the rate on the credit rating of the state is much more favorable than 550 districts could get on their own. And so that's why you go through the school aid loan fund, which is borrowing basically against your state aid. But it's exactly as Mr. Nolan stated, it was, and Lisa, it was to fix the state's cash flow problem way back when. And I just hope that as we move into fiscal 21, and we're still facing the budget uncertainty, as Mr. Nolan and others have stated earlier, that the state doesn't do another one of these to cause us, as we shared in the finance and ops meeting, that depending on the magnitude of a cut that they told us is coming, if it's larger than what they projected in that 650 to 700 that we budgeted for, it will cause us to have to borrow even more. So the cash flow resolution is based on the reasonable amount on the budget we've recommended to adopt. But if, let's say, they do $1,000 cut as we get into the end of August, beginning of September for the state's end of the year where they have to adopt their budget, we may be forced to go borrow $2 or $3 million more. And we have the ability to do that either through local institutions, through short-term loans, or go to subsequent cash flow borrowings that the state could offer out there. Because essentially what the state does for the public and for those in the audience listening is the state takes all the needs, let's say it's $500 million across the state, and they go sell bonds in the open market. And the reason we're paying that interest is because those bonds are paying interest to the holders. And so therefore they're just passing that cost through to the school districts who have borrowed from that pot of money. And it is beneficial, but it's also frustrating because, as Mr. Nolan kind of alluded to, kind of once you get into this cash flow borrowing, you're kind of stuck there until you build that fund balance between that 10 to 20% that we hear at the annual audit, because those are mathematically the numbers that usually allow a district to finally get out of cash flow borrowing, because you have enough cash reserves to get you through the summer months when we don't get any state aid payments. So, hoping for the best.
Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay. Mr. Keller?
Aye.
Mr. Nolan?
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Dr. Watson?
Aye.
Mrs. Becker?
Aye.
Mrs. Novak?
Aye.
Ms. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Okay, next is the food service management contract bid.
I'll make a motion that the food service management contract bid be awarded to Chartwell's contingent upon formal approval of the Michigan Department of Education.
Support.
Okay. I have a motion and a support. Any discussion on the motion?
It's my night. I just want to say thank you to Chartwells. Turns out they ended up being the only bidder on this. I hope it's because others know that they've done such a high quality job for us that they didn't stand a chance here in Lapeer. I just really want to say I appreciate all of the work that those folks have done for us, and look forward to doing business with them in the coming years.
Yes, thank you. Any other discussion? Okay. Mr. Keller?
Aye.
Mr. Nolan?
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Dr. Watson?
Aye.
Mrs. Becker?
Aye.
Mrs. Novak?
Aye.
Mrs. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Okay, next on the agenda is going into closed session to review the Lapeer Educational Support Personnel Contract and the ASME Custodial Contract.
Move the board.
Oh, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
All right. I move that the board move to closed session to discuss negotiations. Sorry about that.
I'll support.
Okay. I have a motion and a support. Any discussion on this motion? Okay, Mr. Keller?
Aye.
Mr. Nolan?
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Dr. Watson?
Aye.
Mrs. Becker?
Aye.
Mrs. Novak, sorry.
Aye.
Mrs. Putnam, motion carries. We are back in session now.
I move that the Lapeer Educational Support Personnel Master Agreement be approved as presented.
Support.
Okay, I have a motion and support. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, Mr. Keller?
Aye.
Mr. Nolan?
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Dr. Watson,
Aye.
Mrs. Becker,
I have to abstain from voting as I have a family member in the LESP.
Mrs. Novak.
Aye.
Mrs. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Okay, last action item on the agenda
I'll
is
move.
the,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead. I'm
I'll
okay.
move that the Ask Me Master Agreement be approved as presented.
Support.
Lots of support. Okay. So we have a motion and a support. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, Mr. Keller,
Aye.
Mr. Nolan,
Aye.
Mr. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Dr. Watson,
Aye.
Ms. Becker,
Aye.
Ms. Novak,
Aye.
Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Okay, that brings us to the board member communication topics for this evening. Anyone have any topics or communication they'd like to share?
I'd just like to thank everyone for all the work on getting these two contracts done again. Everybody always does a great job, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments this evening?
Agreed. I know that doing contracts in the middle of all this, Kim, is not very easy. We appreciate that. To be able to help them see both sides of the story and get to the bottom of it and realize that we've got to get through 1 year at a time right now, which is what we're all doing because it seems to change daily, weekly, you know, it really knows. I mean, we've been experiencing that at work, that all our grand plans change in a drop of a hat. So thank you for getting it done, and let's get to the other side, see where we go from here.
Agree. I think the bird behind you agrees too. Okay, any other comments?
I just wanted to say thank you again for the contracts, but also to Mark Rader and all the work that's done for the budget. Doing a final budget and then doing an initial budget in times like this is not easy. And I think that that's just a lot to be said, that the quality work that they do, even in the unknown, they still provide what we need. As we settled the LESP contract, I was in the building today, I was in the high school, and I thought of the secretaries, and they're a face for the district, and I just really appreciate them. They're nurses and moms and doctors and you name it, they do it for those kids. And so I just think it's important that we recognize the work that they do and the fact that especially during this time, it's pretty difficult. So I'm sure they miss the kids and everything else that goes with it. So I wish them a great summer, hopefully, as they get to go off, and really am appreciative of what they do.
Thank you.
We just give a shout out to Mary Moss for keeping track of all of these changes and putting out what is this, the 4th or 5th rendition of our agenda tonight. Just appreciate all of that hard work. I know it can't be easy to keep up with everything going on, especially going through Zoom meetings half of the time. So thanks, Mary.
Any other comments? Okay, thanks. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Superintendent Wandry, for your comments this evening.
Thank you, Madam President. Just 3 quick ones. We have not met since our district graduation ceremony, and I just wanted to again thank our high school staff for putting together what was a really unique and innovative approach to trying to honor our seniors, not just with graduation, but with the unique swing out, with the signs downtown that was supported by some of our parent groups. And so much energy went into supporting our senior class. We had a lot of project graduation and other really important groups that came alongside of our administration to help, and our staff to help honor our kids in what truly was a unique year in many ways. so many compliments from parents about the graduation ceremony. It's just overwhelming. I think people were very appreciative of the efforts and the lengths we went to do something in person and make it personal, as opposed to just doing a virtual ceremony, which a number of districts did, or postponing it indefinitely, which is also seems to be a pretty popular option. So just, having planned graduation ceremony as a high school principal, it's a tough undertaking in normal circumstances. So shout out to Doug and Shad and the team there for doing a great job. Also, thank you to Kim and the team as it relates to the contracts. Not only is it important to get a ratification during these difficult times, at the speed at which and the timeliness that these contracts were able to be completed and reached agreement upon is really, it speaks volumes to the level of trust that we've been able to establish with our most important staff members and units in these groups, that they truly understand and appreciate what's happening in the district. They and our partners in helping us solve some of these problems, and sometimes we're most acutely aware of that partnership during times like contract negotiations, but it's really the other 360 days of the year that we're not bargaining that are the most important, and that's where you build trust. That's where you build that relationship, and the fruit of which comes to bear during contract negotiations. So good job, Kim. And then one final personal comment, just very excited to continue as superintendent of Lapeer Schools, and really looking forward to the many challenges that lie ahead and facing them with this group and with my team in place. There's, in a time of so much uncertainty, I know that a lot of folks have reached out to me, and there's one less thing that seems uncertain. And so, but just very personally and professionally, excited to remain in the district and continue the great work we've done. So thanks to the board, and I really appreciate the opportunity to continue here.
Thank you, Superintendent Wandry. We really look forward to it as well. So I think that brings us to our last speaker for tonight. I have a
motion to adjourn.
Okay, I have a motion.
Support.
I have a support. Okay. Mr. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mrs. Novak?
Aye.
Mrs. Becker?
Aye.
Mr. Nolan?
Aye.
Mr. Keller?
Aye.
Dr. Watson?
Aye.
Mrs. Putnam says aye. Motion carries. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Good night,
Have a
everyone.
good-
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.